Welcome to the Coach Dave Love podcast with NBA shooting coach Dave Love and your host, Matt Robertson, exploring the cutting edge of evidence-based shooting development in basketball today, from shooting form to skill acquisition to shot metrics. This is the Coach Dave Love podcast.
Welcome to the Coach Dave Love podcast. I am your host, Matt Robertson, and with me, as always, NBA shooting coach Dave Love. Dave, what's going on?
I'm shook right now, as the kids would say, because you've had a very different intonation on that and it didn't go unnoticed, obviously, because I'm bringing it up immediately. But what is going on? Not a lot. Headed to Australia. Got my, 7 days of camps coming up there. Putting the finishing touches on the periodization research that I'm doing with Fabian Ott, and some other things that can't be named.
The juggling act continues.
Yeah. How are things with you, Maddie?
Oh, man. Shot 97 yesterday, just on the top of my game. Really brief child story. Also, 2 nights ago, we're doing this thing where we put him to bed, dry and clean and fed, and let him cry to sleep, which is great and has been amazing. But 2 nights ago, he cried for 2 minutes and then stopped, and then 7 or 8 minutes later, cried again for 10 minutes and then went to sleep. It was just fine. Yeah. The next morning, we found a puddle of vomit on the floor beside the crib. And so at some point had got himself spun around, but there was nothing on or in the crib. So he projectiled to the wall through the slats in the crib. He's a magician. So, we're off to a good start.
Onto laminate or hardwood or tile, or onto the carpet?
Hardwood. Yeah. No tile, no carpet in this place.
Like, you were just like Oscar, like taking care of business for us. Thank you so much. Great work. And we now know exactly when this occurred also.
Yes, I was like, this is magical. Anyway, sorry to all the weak-stomached people out there, but that's the eventful happenings in my life.
Wonderful. Let's get right into the do we have anything that we need to kind of address?
From a preamble standpoint?
Yeah, like important things to discuss, like because I know we talked about like always being upfront, and I know we said that a couple of times because we're planning to record 2 podcasts today. Were there any acknowledgments that we wanted to make for this one, as far as it's the next one where I'm not an expert on one of the things that we're talking about, right?
What we are talking about in this particular podcast, you are an expert of, and other than some generalizations, I don't have a lot of knowledge beyond just the general piece. So I'm excited to dive into this today because I feel like there's a lot for me to learn today.
Let's dive into it.
The topic for today, body posture in basketball shooting. Dave Love, take it away.
Yeah. So essentially what we're talking about is how do you stand? And so I want people to understand that your body posture, the position that you're in, plays a role in 2 parts of your shot that really flow into each other. Number one, your body posture is going to help you stop the negative energy that you create when you're moving on the floor. And then it will play a role in creating positive energy out of that position. But we have to make sure that we understand this is rarely going to be perfect. And so I feel like we've been saying this a lot in previous episodes, which is good because it's important. But I don't want you to practice your body posture in outrageously simple situations where you're challenging yourself to be perfect. But we'll get to all that.
No, this is great. I had some feedback in the wild, like I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, that people like the more physical minutia that we're doing because this is your superpower. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of awesome stuff that we've talked about that are good learning opportunities that self-admittedly you're not an expert on. This is one of the things you are an expert on. So I am excited to kind of dive in. So I guess the question to get us started, Dave, is what is good posture and why does it matter? And I have a quick preamble for you before this, because for me, my experience is you said the words in a clinic a bunch of years ago, stack your joints. And so
Mhm.
that's the visual that I had as good posture, and then kind of moved on from there. So I know this is a much more detailed and nuanced subject than that, but that's just kind of where I'm coming from a knowledge base.
Yeah. And what year was that clinic? Do you remember? Would that have
Like
been like 2017 or so?
like 14, 15, somewhere in there.
Oh, it couldn't have been. Oh, it might have been. No, it might have been. Yeah. Okay, you're right. It might have been 2015. Holy moly. We're old. But yeah, that idea of stack your joints, like that was just sort of a little cue that I tried to come up with, and I don't necessarily love it because it's probably a little bit too internal. But I think it encapsulates a lot of different things in just 3 words. Stack your joint. Yeah, 3 words. That's Matt. That's 3 words.
Okay, thanks.
Um, and so while I probably don't do the clinics the same way, they've evolved. And I probably wouldn't use that term very often any longer. The idea still remains that essentially with good posture, good shooting posture, we want to sort of have the weight on the front of your foot. We want to have our ankles, our knees, and our hips bent. So knees push forward, hips sit back a little bit, and shoulders are forward. And ultimately, all of this is being in an athletic position. And so when we talk about posture, I just want you to think about like how would a shortstop position their body when the ball is hitting the bat? How is a soccer goalie positioning their body just before the person taking the penalty kick kicks the ball? How is a defensive back standing at the line of scrimmage just before the snap of the ball, and they've got to react to the movements of the wide receiver? Like all those sorts of different things. That's essentially what we're talking about here.
So be in an athletic posture. Okay. Well, this has been the Coach Dave Love podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe. And no, so when you say that again, it's so general, and I completely understand what you mean when you say that. I have a perfect picture in my brain of all those different sports, all those different athletes in those positions. But it's so freaking nuanced once you start to talk about it.
Well, it can be, and this is I guess that's why I started with that um, vague answer, is because um, we could go into, and we will go into all the little components and the details that make this up. But then they don't all apply to every single person in every situation. And ultimately, what people are, and I'm probably jumping all over the place given our notes. Full transparency, we have notes. But every situation is going to require a different divergence away from the optimal to solve the problem created by the situation. And so we'll start by talking about what it means to stack your joints, and then we'll go into like how you should be practicing this a little bit. So can you keep me, because I keep trying to get ahead of myself, can you keep me a little focus on, do you want to go into like the smaller details?
Yeah, so I do want to talk about sort of the broader key elements, and then we'll make our way down from there, if that's okay with you.
You guide me with questions here.
Okay, so why don't you get after some of the key elements of good shooting posture? So just run us down a few of the broader pieces.
Okay, so the things that I look for, I usually start at the bottom of the player's body and work our way up. So I want the feet to be outside the hips in order to be balanced. I would like knees to be over top of the feet if we were viewing from in front or from behind, so that we're not having knees cave in. And then if we're viewing from the side, knees bent and ankles bent so that the knees are over top of the toes. I then want the hips to be in a neutral position. so that we don't have a significant twist or turn in our hips or lean in our hips. Hips set back a little bit to counterbalance the fact that our knees and our shoulders will be forward. And then the angle of our spine kind of in the same approximate plane as we want the basketball to go. We want the ball to go up and forward by leaning our shoulders forward and having our hips back. Our spine is going to match that plane if we're viewing the player from the side, so that the spine is tilted in the same direction that the ball is going to be moving out of the set point.
So it's interesting. So I do want to sidetrack a little bit here on this point. When you talk about specific spine angle, I'd never really heard that terminology or that usage when it came in the shooting context. You were the first one, like 7 or 8 years ago. You told me a story about Channing Frye with the Orlando Magic. Can you tell me that story again? You know the one I'm referring to?
Yeah. First of all, before we even get to that, in what context have you heard spine angle?
So literally twice, and once was in the context of the Channing Frye story, and then once was in the workout for the G League Ignite player where I was rebounding last summer, and that was
never on the golf course.
I mean, no,
because that's where I took that terminology from. Is I just whatever I was reading, I was probably into Golf Digest magazine at the time, and they would often talk about like the spine angle, that forward lean of the shoulders, because the athletic body posture in golf is different than the athletic body posture in other sports. There's not as much leg bend. There's not as much ankle flexion. Sorry?
Go ahead.
But that forward lean is the same, and somebody was referring to it as spine angle, and I just thought that makes sense to my brain, and that's just how I ended. I didn't consciously label it as spine angle, but so I think of it two different ways, and your Channing Frye story leads me towards the other one. So I'm thinking right now of leaning your shoulders forward, so your shoulders are in front of your hips and your spine is on an angle up and forward. With Channing Frye, there was a moment where we didn't work together in Orlando particularly, but there was a practice where he just kind of turned to me and says, "You got anything for me? Like, you got like any advice that you can offer?" And I said, "Well, there's one thing, but I'm kind of hesitant to say it to you." He's like, "No, give it to me." And I think I was hesitant because it was a game day, and I don't like giving new advice on a game day. But I said, well, the one thing I've noticed is when you go left, you're very straight up and down. And like your spine angle is straight up and down if I were standing behind you. But when you go to your right, you tend to plant left foot first, inside foot, forward pivot around, and you don't get your full weight onto your right foot. And so your spine angle is leaning to your left. And now you've got like disproportionate weight on either foot, and so you're going to be pushing differently with your legs. You do it, and he caught on to that really, really quickly. And what was amazing, and please don't do this with it. Like, I was trying to avoid doing this, but I said that to him. I said, "Now, just do not think about this tonight." And so I even gave him a drill where I said, like, as I asked him to go left, and I said, "Can you feel yourself being straight up and down?" And then I'll go right. "Can you feel yourself leaning to the left?" And he was either able to, or I showed him video where he could see it. I can't remember which. But then I said to him, "Okay, going right now, while I wouldn't encourage you to do this in a game, I just want you to do this so that you can see if this helps you feel getting the weight onto your right foot and your spine more straight up and down. I want you to go to your right, but plant your feet outside foot, inside foot. Plant your right foot first so that we know you get weight onto your right foot, and then plant your left, and hopefully you'll be more straight up and down when you're doing it." And he caught onto it very, very quickly, or at least he liked the idea. And I said to him, do not think about this tonight. And he's like, no, I feel like I'm like, I would not do that. I would just go out, do what you do. And then if you want to work on this, we can work on this outside of a game setting, but don't try and put this into the game tonight. And sure enough, first pick and pop out to the 3, he plants right foot, left foot, and knocks it down. And I'm just like, this is how freakishly talented some of these guys are, and we don't necessarily think of Channing Frye as otherworldly talent because of the absolute freaks of natures that he's competing against. But oh my God, the ability to, number one, be in that situation and remember to use a new tool, use it well, and get the result on the first attempt. It's just freaky.
There are 2 pieces of that I just want to reference before we move on. And the first part is, I thought you were going to say you were hesitant to tell him because he's like a 42% career 3-point shooter or whatever that number is.
Yeah,
he's pretty good.
That is why.
But secondly, the other thing I'm worried about is for the people taking this away, going, ooh, Coach Dave said going outside foot, inside foot while moving right is a better. Dave's philosophy remains as optimal balance as possible in the shooting motion. And for Channing Frye, that is the optimal footwork for his balance in that moment, correct?
Sort of. But more, that was a situation that got him to feel what I was talking about. And then if he had allowed me the time, I would have said to him, like, okay, now see if you can apply that feeling into the more efficient footwork of inside foot, outside foot. But he just, I do like the fact that he had another tool in his tool belt, but in this situation that we're talking about is probably a less efficient tool. And so stay away from it, but you can use it in a practice environment to help the player feel and then develop the cue off of the feeling.
Above my pay grade is what we're going to go with for that. But thank you for that little detour, because I think it is a useful story for the people.
Perfect. And now we're all over the place with our notes. I have no idea what section we're on. So how about we take a little break? And then when we come back from the break, we'll do our ATO, and then you get me back on track with with what section we're on. If we need to backtrack a little bit, because I've been bouncing all over the place.
I got you, buddy. You're Kramered up. Let's take a quick break here.
Hey there, basketball fans. I'm NBA shooting coach Dave Love, and I've got exciting news just for you. Introducing my exclusive, free basketball shooting newsletter. It's packed with insights and techniques straight from the hardwood. Have you ever wondered how NBA players improve their shots? Or how you could get to the next level, whether you're a college player, a coach, or a budding youth player? My newsletter brings all this and more directly to your inbox. Each edition is a deep dive into the world of basketball shooting. I'll share some of the tips and ideas that I use with my NBA clients, tailored for every level of the game. But wait, there's more. Subscribers receive exclusive monthly discounts on my online products. From training videos to personalized coaching sessions, you'll get it all for a fraction of the price. And the best part of all, it's absolutely free to join. So what are you waiting for? Elevate your game and join a community of passionate players and coaches from around the globe. Signing up is easy. Just visit CoachDaveLove.com.
All right, welcome back. For first-time listeners of the show, we have a gimmick that we call an ATO. So after a timeout, we put 24 up on the thought clock in my office, and Coach Dave has to run an after timeout and give us a concise look at an important thing we covered in the last section.
What I want to make sure that people got out of the last section is the understanding that our body posture helps us with 2 different parts of our shot that flow into each other. Number one, getting stable when there's negative energy created by the movement that we're doing on the floor, and then the creation of positive energy out of that body posture. And our body posture will affect both those things.
Pretty good. You can clip it. Only put it on Twitter, not YouTube. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, it's a great look, Coach Dave. And again, even a mediocre one for you now is infinitely better than our first ATOs 28 odd episodes ago, right? So
I thought you were going to say is infinitely better than the 18 minutes of rambling that people had to live, which might also be true.
Hey,
that's why we're doing the ATOs.
So really, we're just going to put the ATOs in the show notes, and you can fast forward to them and just get out. But seriously, please listen to us. Just kidding. All right, Coach Dave. So let's get you back on track here. Let's talk about what are some common posture mistakes that people are making.
All right. So even seasoned players can fall prey to some common posture mistakes like standing too upright, which often comes out of too much stationary practice. Each misalignment from chest down to hips forward tells its own story of lost energy and missed shots. There's our little sound bite that I wrote earlier, and let's get into what this means. So first thing, most common, too upright. We're practicing in far too easy of a setting, and we're just casually shooting shots, usually stationary or with very little dynamic movement preceding the shot. And so you can get away with being stable, stable in that easy situation, in the kind of body posture that won't help you be stable in an actual game-like situation. And so, yeah, go ahead. You got a good question.
Yeah. Thank you. No, when you say too upright, are you talking about like I'm not in an athletic posture, or are you talking about straight upper body too upright? Like my spine angle isn't leaned enough. Is that a combination of the two?
It could be either. To me, those are two different things, but yeah, how we want to label them, both of those things that we're talking about that you just mentioned fall into this category. I was speaking more of like you're not bending your ankles, you're not bending your knees, you're not bent at your hips enough. You're standing too straight up and down. But another common mistake would be just getting your shoulders over top of your hips. And being too upright in that part of the posture as well. So that'll be number one. The next most common, and these aren't in order, these are just things that I see all over the place, especially with young players starting their shot with their chest down, that they're really crouching down, really hinging at the hips far more, in order to have more room to generate power up. And unfortunately, that puts them in a position to be potentially really off balance forward. And so we have to be mindful of that. Third on the list would be the hips coming forward too early. So we start in a pretty good body posture, but then we end up with the hips coming forward rather than hips staying back and driving up, and that just causes all sorts of different things. That's usually the people that end up getting their shoulders back over top of their hips. It's all these different things counterbalance each other. So I want the weight on the front of the foot and the knees forward, counterbalanced by the hips back, which is then counterbalanced by the shoulders going forward. And so if you adjust one of those, if you get the weight too much back on your heels, then you're going to have to counterbalance the weight being back with your hips coming forward. And now you've got to counterbalance that with your shoulders going backwards. And that just is a much more difficult position to be balanced and generate force out of. I'm just looking through the notes, talked about shoulders back, and then we should probably spend a bunch of time on this one, the turn of the feet. And I'm not super pro the turn. There are situations where I don't mind it as much, but we just need to be aware turning your feet does affect your spine angle. And So I feel like I've been rambling. Do you need to ask any questions on any of the previous points before we get to this turn of the feet part?
First of all, never a ramble, just a stream of consciousness. But secondly, I do want you to clarify when you talk about the turn of the feet. So we're talking about angling your feet somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees, sometimes more if you think Mo Peterson, away from the line of the hoop. And then which spine angle are you talking about? So I just want you to clarify. So when we talked about straight up and down, being too upright versus too bent over versus side to side. So just clarify those two items when it comes to the turn.
Okay. Turn of the feet. Man, which of those two spine angles? It makes the forward lean appear to be a sideways tilt. So imagine standing behind a player that is turning their feet. They lean their shoulders forward relative to the direction that their feet are pointed. Their joints are stacked, but their shoulders went forward and to the left relative to the direction that they're going to be shooting the basketball. And so then what happens as they start to push and extend their body, their shoulders, which were now leaning to the left relative to the direction that they're going to be shooting the basketball, are now moving back to the right as they extend. So this is why I have a big portion of why I try to avoid a significant turn of the feet. I don't mind slight. If you have a 10 to 15 degree turn of your feet, I'm probably never going to say a word. At 30 degrees, I'm going to start to pay attention to it. And at 45, I start to get really concerned.
So if you look at the face of a clock and your feet are pointing at midnight or 12 or noon, depending if you're hungry or not, is 11 o'clock acceptable or no? Like 11:30 is acceptable?
would be a 30 degree turn, okay. Which so is right around that point. As part of the shot metrics study that we did on the axis of rotation of the spin of the ball, one of the things that we measured was, does the release of the ball from your hand change if we change your feet? And the short answer is it absolutely does. And part of what I did, so with all these different players, I had to, with a protractor, lay down tape that was parallel to the target line and say to the players, I want you to now hop in, land with your feet straight at the target. And then we measured the spin of the ball then. Then I had to measure a 15 degree turn. Now 15 would be 11:30 on the clock. And then have people land in that. And most felt pretty comfortable with that. And I would be pretty comfortable as a coach with a 15 degree turn. 30 degree turn is 11 o'clock. 10:30 is a 45 degree turn. And then we had a 60 degree turn, which is 10 o'clock. And every single player is like, who does this? And I'm like, I agree with you, but I was wondering where I needed to kind of cut off the amount of turn for this study. Like I thought 45 would be the maximum, but I put it on Twitter. Like, how much of a turn would you encourage as a coach? And enough people said a 60 degree turn that I had to include it in the study. It's outrageous. 60 degrees is now all like, it feels like 90. But anyway, we've digressed a lot away from the original point, but that turn of your body to the left causes a lean of your spine relative to the target line. Again, go back and just stand behind a shooter, ask them to turn their feet 45 degrees and and get into an athletic stance. And from your vantage point, standing directly behind them, they will appear to be leaning forward and to the left, whereas they just think they're leaning forward because that's where their feet are pointed. Hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I hope that if you're just sitting in traffic and you angle your body in the way that Dave is talking about. So if you're watching on YouTube, you probably see me roll my chair back in my office and do the thing you're talking about, because me feeling that is the best, like the best teaching piece for me, because then, that makes so much sense to me that I'm only facing this much and my shoulders are now crowded and angled and leaned and whatever. Yeah. So I'd encourage you to, if you didn't, when the time came, to go back and to feel what that feels like.
Well, and so then some people who are big advocates of the turn and don't want to change, won't open their minds at all to the potential downsides. I'm not saying it absolutely is a downside. I'm just saying it's a potential downside to it. They'll say, well, then you have your feet turned but square up your shoulders. Well, now you've got your feet on one line, your hips on a different line, and your shoulders on a different line still, and you're twisting yourself. And so that would be my worry. I'd actually rather somebody have their feet slightly turned and their shoulders square to square to the angle of their feet, versus having their feet turned but squaring up their shoulders. But I'd rather be in a position where we can generate more positive energy and not have to worry about twisting or leaning at all.
I know you call that a digression, but I think that's very practical, very poignant when it comes to posture. This is all part of the package.
A lot of these topics are just jumping off points for Dave, just going on tangents.
When the tangents are on topic, they're not a tangent, they're a learning opportunity.
Right. Yeah. All these things are connected. And I hope, I just hope people are starting to see, that the different practice methods are all connected, and the different physical things. Even though we're talking about feet and we're talking about hand, your feet are connected to your hands. There's a few different joints in between, but they're connected by your body. So one does affect the other.
In practice last night, very quick digression, the other assistant coach was asking about shooting form where the elbow is out. And I said, honestly, when it comes to the Dave Love non-negotiables, shooting the middle of the ball with the middle of your hand is the thing you talk about. If your elbow is locked in a position where your wrist is in the right, your wrist and hand are in the right positions, then it's fine. Or it is not, it's optimal for you, depending on your flexibility and the way your body moves. And that's exactly what you're talking about. These are all connected pieces that are going to be applicable to each individual player in the right places in the right times.
You're a good person.
Thank you. That's very kind. Let's get through one more of these sections before we go to our next break. So Dave, when we're looking at practicing correct posture, how do we do that? It seems like a simple thing to be like, well, just stand straighter, but how do we actually practice that?
You need to practice it by solving problems. And so your body posture is your solution to help you solve game-like problems. And if you are not practicing the solution to a problem, then you're just reinforcing an overly simple thing as though that's the way it must be done. So your body posture is going to help you get balanced in hard situations. We should be practicing our body posture in positions where we either start off balance or we start out of position. And I'll do this in a whole bunch of different ways. I'll do this with my pushing series and my leaning series, where just basically you are out of the ideal body posture. Therefore, you are off balance in some way. And then there's some sort of movement. And during that movement, you've got to figure out how to correct that negative energy that the movement is creating so that you can create positive energy. If you're just stationary, and I do see this on Instagram a fair amount now, this has become this cute little hot topic that just drop your hips. And we've got players now doing task decomposition drills so much that it's okay, stand there and just drop your hips over and over and over again. You were never off balance in the first place. You were never in a game-like position trying to find. You were in an overly simplified situation and creating the smallest of problems. I would far rather you invest more time in solving a bigger problem, but not always getting an A on it, than trying to solve this small problem that you always get your A.
So in that sense, the task decomposition drill is way too simple for the athlete. So let's say we're talking about like a 12 or 13-year-old who's still kind of growing into their body, is kind of firing them left or right with a push and getting them to land balance. The best way to teach this, the best way to work on this, so creating the whole body problem and forcing self-organization. I know that's sort of a reiteration of what you said, but can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we can make ourselves feel really good as coaches by saying, okay, little Bobby, you knew it was coming. Little Bobby, I need you to stand like this, where your ankles are bent, your knees are forward, your hips are back, your shoulders are forward, that nothing's twisted. I need you to stand like that. That's the perfect body posture for you to start. Good, you're standing like that now. Now shoot a shot. We can make ourselves as coaches feel really smart by coaching that way. And number one, the player is going to tune you out. And the player is, and if they don't tune you out, then they're going to be dependent on you to solve problems for them. Instead, what we should be doing is saying, I'm going to push you. When you land, you have to be on balance. And most times when I do this, like I'll do this at a clinic with a 12-year-old boy, and I'll push him the first time, and he usually has to take about 6 steps to get his balance afterwards. Like occasionally they'll fall over. This is a kid that thinks they're a good basketball player for being a 12-year-old, but they're just not, they don't know how to solve a problem. And so the second time I push, they can almost always land. And I haven't said a word in between. I haven't taught them how to do it. I just gave them a problem and expected them to solve it. And now usually they're smiling and they're engaged, and they, whether they can express it or not, their body knew how to solve the problem. They are now dependent on themselves, not dependent on me.
You've said previously that the ability to relay a feeling in words is way less important than the ability to just feel the feeling and solve the problem. So, for example, you talking to little Bobby for 10 minutes about the proper balance and the proper posture and getting Bobby to reiterate that to you is way less valuable than you just shoving him and him figuring it out in the,
right.
In the moment.
And it could be his ability to solve the problem and his ability to explain how he solved the problem could be linked, but they aren't always. And what do we really need? We need you to be able to solve the problem, not be able to articulate it to me. So, like, as I've said many times on the podcast, I'll ask players, like, did you feel that? Yes. Won't even tell them, like, or ask them to explain what they felt. Did you feel something wrong? Yes. Do you know how to fix it? Not even like, what will you do to fix it? Do you know? Yes. Show me. Good. Like, and they've said 2 words, yes, twice. And so their body was able to adjust to the problem that was created, but they may not be able to articulate it. In a game, I don't need them to be able to articulate it. I just need them to be able to get balanced. And so, just before I feel like you might be moving on here, I mentioned the pushing and leaning drills. I will do the leaning drills. Well, I guess it kind of fits into both. One of the things I've been playing with, and I think Coleman Ayers may have inspired this drill after being inspired by one of mine. And so how I do this is I'll have a player stand on one foot with the basketball in their hand, and I tell them, I want you to now explore all like the outer edges of your balance. I want you to move forward as far as you can on the one foot. I want you to move over to your right as far as you can. I want you to lean back as far as you can. Like, just keep exploring all these weird body positions that are right on the edge of you being off balance. And then I'm going to be stalking around you like a cat. And when I feel like there's an advantage, I'm either going to push you or pull you. And I'm going to just, you're already going to be teetering on the edge of off balance. I'm going to be magnifying that, making you move. You've got to land stable. And what posture do they go to? Probably pretty close to the ideal posture. Is it going to be right, an A+ every single time? No, because games are hard. And so sometimes they're going to get B's and C's, but C's get degrees, as the saying goes. Did I make that joke last podcast?
No, but that is something that we said at the university that I went to. So D's get degrees, actually, is what.
Oh, you said D's? Yeah, D's get perfect. That rhymes as well. And yeah, like your shot doesn't have to be an A to go in. I'd like you to explore around an A, but since you're never going to get A's in games, don't practice with that expectation.
This is yet another example of Chris Oliver's whole part, only if I need it philosophy, which again, I think about all the freaking time. Instead of using skill decomposition and practicing one little piece of this, just firing a full body movement and forcing the whole body to sort itself works in a bunch of different contexts.
Yeah, and then I do that with a form shooting drill. So if they're already a capable shooter, we can do that with just a shot by providing now some challenge to the player by getting a balance. And then if the player is a weaker shooter, we can add in the leaning and pushing drills to provide further challenge in an area that they aren't struggling in, but then slow down and simplify where they are struggling, which could be hand placement or guide hand usage or any of that stuff. So hopefully, as you listen to more podcasts, hopefully all this is kind of making sense and you're formulating your own plans around it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. You take the tools, add them to your toolbox, change them as needed. Somebody sent me something today, an old advisor who's been doing this job for 20 years. And he was like, hey, this is something that I used when I first got started. And I was like, well, I looked at it. It was like, it's a little too for where I am. However, there was a couple of elements that I'm not using and I think are brilliant. So take it, change it to your needs, credit the source, and move along with the tools you've got in your toolbox. Coach Dave, let's take a quick break before we come to the next section.
Hey basketball fans, Coach Dave Love here with an exclusive offer just for you, my personalized video shot analysis. Imagine having an NBA shooting coach analyze your shooting form, just like I do for the pros. That's exactly what you'll get with my video shot analysis. Here's how it works. You send me a video of your shot and I'll break it down frame by frame. I'll pinpoint your strengths and identify the areas of improvement and give you tailored advice to take your shot to the next level. You'll receive a comprehensive analysis designed just for you. Whether you're a beginner or an aspiring pro, my feedback will help you shoot with confidence and precision. It isn't just feedback, it's a game changer. With my video shot analysis, you're not just practicing, you're evolving, and every single shot counts. Ready to transform your game? Visit CoachDaveLove.com/store to learn more and get started. That's CoachDaveLove.com/store and look for video shot analysis.
All right, welcome back. Coach Dave, that was another long section. We're going to go to another ATO. We're going to put 24 up on the thought clock. Dave, give us something important, concisely, that we talked about in the last segment.
I'm going to go a little bit off script and just say what we talked about is essentially skill adaptability drills, where you are now creating a problem and guiding towards an optimal solution in a situation where optimal might not be possible. And that's how we should be practicing body posture, by not doing it in the super easy environment where we can do it perfectly all the time, but doing it in an environment where it's hard to do it perfectly, but we're trying to get close.
Awesome. Got a good look. Great job by you. Coach Dave, we have one section left before we get to the conclusion, and I want you to settle into physical requirements and strength building. So this is kind of piggybacking on the thing we talked about last.
Okay, so to be in an athletic body posture, there needs to be a certain amount of physical strength. And young players, especially like 12-year-old boys, aren't always known for their physical strength. And so we just need to be aware of this. And then we have to coach accordingly. And a big part of that is going to be just patience, because physical strength doesn't happen just because you explain to a player how to do it. Sometimes it takes time for that to develop. So for somebody to be able to stop the amount of force that is generated by them jumping to the left and a coach pushing them to the left, and their whole body now is accelerating with a certain amount of force, and they need to stop the mat, or a certain amount of mass, and they need to stop the force. Muscles will be involved, and if those muscles aren't particularly strong, they're going to struggle with this. We can improve the strength of those muscles by doing body weight squats, and we probably should be doing some of that, but we can also improve those muscles by putting them in this situation. And effectively, the drill that we're talking about is a dynamic body weight squat followed by a shot, or a plyometric squat. I think a strength and conditioning person would get jump to your left, squat down. So we're doing the things that are going to strengthen the muscles, and it won't just be I'm going to get outside my realm. It won't just be the muscles that help us travel in a straight line. It will be the lateral muscles as well. My daughter in sports medicine would be able to tell me what the phrase for that is, but I don't quite know. We've got to train in multiple different planes, not just in one.
Better. I like that. I was going to say all the stabilizer muscles and everything else, but that's still also outside my comfort zone also. Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense to me, and especially for those younger ages where developing strength is needed for this. Coach Dave, in the setting where you have somebody who's a university player or a professional player, and there's probably less strength building required, you tend to lean on the previous section of drills where it's more of a skill acquisition piece and core strengthening. Like, can you just talk about that difference for a second?
They will probably have the physical strength required to stop their own momentum. They might just not be in the habit of being in the position that will help them, especially in certain situations. Like, I find even if a professional player struggles the first time I push them to their side, their struggle will be fairly small, and they will sort it out by the second rep. But then you get them in a situation where they're moving backwards, and that gets hard. Like, moving straight backwards is probably the hardest situation for us to get balanced in. And so the solutions the solution to that problem are probably not going to be the ideal body posture. And that's going back to this, just under the understanding that don't practice this expecting A's in really, really easy situations. Moving backwards, like somebody backpedaling out to a corner 3, you're probably going to end up back on your heels as a player. Or if you are able to land with the weight on your toes, you're probably going to have your shoulders more forward than the optimal body posture. You might have your chest pointed down a little bit. Good. Can you solve that problem? Like that's the body posture that was needed to stop that energy. Now, can you get from that posture into the ideal posture?
The NBA fan in me, as you're talking about this, the NBA fan in me just sidetracked to the Ray Allen shot against the Spurs.
Great example.
It's the best example of this skill, and it is absolutely a skill, physical skill. I actually am curious now that you've described what you've talked about through this episode, and that my brain is thinking about it, to go back and freeze frame as he's finished backpedaling, caught the ball, and is about to take off, what his body posture looked like and how he self-organized in that moment. Like, what a challenging moment. Not only all the pressure and the actual specific moment, but just late in the game to be unbalanced, backpedaling out, to be able to catch and shoot. Like, what a challenging situation to put your body in.
I think we mentioned this on the previous podcast. Not only the nominal test difficulty, but the functional test difficulty as well. No, I'm not confident enough yet to explain, but I'll do. As I understand it, nominal difficulty are the things that are difficult for everybody, and functional difficulty are the things that are difficult for you specifically or in that situation. And so it was a difficult shot because it was game 6 of the NBA Finals with no time left on the clock, and from 22.5 feet. What is the sideline? Anyways, it doesn't matter.
18-foot 3-point line plus
with the hand in his face, and then all the functional difficulty that goes along with it of having to backpedal out and having to get balance. And it would be, and we may find on that particular shot, maybe he did start, but again, we can show me the body posture of somebody at the end of a jab step. Is that our ideal body? No, but we've got to be able to get from that into a shot. And how, like, that's your starting point. Can we get from a jab into a shooting motion without having to take a completely separate step of, okay, now get into shooting position, and now you need to flow from one into the other, and that's where we should be practicing.
Another comment on why practicing the perfect shooting position is not, it's maybe not pointless, but it's not ideal, because coming from a jab step into a jump shot is a completely different motion. You're not going to go reset to triple threat and then elevate from triple threat, because nobody has time for that given the game situation. Coach Dave, absolutely. Yeah. Again, I hope that the listeners are having this experience that as you connect all these ideas, the full picture just makes so much sense.
We got some nice non-linear learning going on. Now I think we're at episode, this might be 39 or 40. People like you've had enough reps with some of this that you're connecting the dots really quickly on stuff. It's awesome to watch.
Buddy, I really appreciate that. Going from A to B to F to C and back to A to B, the nonlinear learning, it's all starting to click together, and still so much to learn, but it's been a great journey. Okay, Coach Dave, as we sort of run out of time here, let's go into hammer action, which is the other gimmick that we run here on this podcast, where we hammer home actionable items from today's episode. Coach Dave, give us a hammer action. What is the best piece of advice you can give people from the episode today?
If you want to create a cue around body posture, then the first thing that I would do is I would have somebody stand. A bench usually isn't high enough. If I did this with a player where we had one of those box jumps boxes, and so he stood up on that, and I said, just jump down and then land stable. And he landed in the body posture. I'm like, okay, when your body needs to get stable, that's where it's going to go to. And so what did that feel like? He gave me that was the beginning of our cue. Then it's all right, push drill, and pushing in all kinds of different directions to guide towards finding that particular situation. Then get players off balance. You can push them off balance, or you can cause them to lean and then pull the chair out from under them. If hopefully people understand what I mean by that. Like, I'll have somebody lean forward with their body completely flat, like no hinge at the hips, no bend at the knee, their body completely flat, and my hands are underneath their shoulders. I'm standing in front of them, holding them up. And then I'll count down 3, 2, 1 and jump out of the way. And they've got to go from, I was leaning forward, being held up by somebody, and now they're not there, and I've got to get my balance before I fall on my face. And then practicing again, moving, leaning all sorts of different directions, and with all sorts of different twists and turning and momentum in different directions. Learn how to stop that. That's our ideal body posture.
How much of this is a repetition-oriented learning practice, and how much of it is just them learning what it feels like in their body to properly adjust from this, do you think? Like, do they get better with reps, or you show it to them twice and they're like, oh, I get it, and then, we keep going?
I would say 80% of the movements they get very, very quickly. But it helps us identify the one that is challenging. As a lot of players, it's moving backwards. To get your balance moving backwards is really hard, or to get your balance when you're moving forward, but you don't know when you're going to stop, and you're actually like generating some force. It's really easy to stop yourself when you're moving forward when you're just hopping forward. It's a lot harder when it's a full sprint and you don't know when you're going to be stopping. Those two directions. I think it's easier to stop laterally, but to stop forward back is tougher. And so now you know that with each particular player, and then you adjust your practice accordingly.
I love how in the story you said, so just to piggyback on that, in the story earlier, you found the one for Channing. It was going right, and that was his issue. And find the one thing for every player. Coach Dave, as always, you're an absolute delight. Appreciate the time. Can you please tell the people where they can find you?
Go on my newsletter, coachdavelove.com. Sign up for that. I'll send you boatloads of free information through that. And same thing on social media at Coach Dave Love on Instagram and Twitter. And if you'd like to talk about hosting a clinic or coming to train with me in Calgary and in person, then those are the avenues that you can do that through.
Awesome. And I'm Matt Robertson. You can find me on LinkedIn and also on Twitter at Coach Matty Rob. Please rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend. It all really helps. Thanks for sticking to the end of the episode. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Coach Dave Love Podcast. To stay up to date with our future episodes, please remember to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to sign up for Coach Love's free shooting newsletter on CoachDaveLove.com, and be sure to follow him on social media. You can find him at Coach Dave Love.